If you ask me, the 5-year-old Jordan, what do you want to do? It's just help people. Like, I just wanted to help people. Being 20 and divorced, I went down a pretty dark road and got really addicted to alcohol, really addicted to everything but Jesus, and found myself in a really broken place. The pastor here at this church was like, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the messy, broken people, because that's who I can do ministry with.
Leadership is not that title. It's the messy work that no one wants to do. It's having those difficult conversations with someone you lead and being willing to do it and package it in a way that comes out of wanting the best for that person.
It's okay to not be okay.
That part's not talked about enough, especially in... Welcome back to the Better Than Best Academy podcast, where we help Christian leaders like you break free from limited beliefs, rediscover their true identity, and step boldly into their God-given purpose. I'm Coach Red, and my mission is to equip and empower you to live with clarity, confidence, and make a lasting kingdom impact. Our guest today is Jordan Davis, a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience in kids ministry. He's a husband for 18 years, a father of 3 boys, and as the founder of the Smoking Pastor Project, Jordan combines his passion for barbecue and serving to bring free meals to those in need, creating a connection and hope through food. Now today, we're so excited to have you on the show, Jordan. We're excited for your insight and on personal growth and the power of, I think it's second chances and building meaningful connections. But first, I gotta ask, I gotta know, the people at home, they're just dying to know, which would you choose, kids ministry or barbecue? What's more unpredictable and why?
Man, I don't know. Like, kids ministry is definitely unpredictable. Every day I get asked questions about dead goldfish coming back to life, and like, we run out of cheeses is my biggest problem at church sometimes, is run out of goldfish. But man, like, doing free meals, there is some interesting characters on the street, and that's what I love. I love it. So I don't know, like, I'm battling this in my life right now. I love both these so much. And I think they go hand in hand. I think it's just outreach is what God's called me to. So that's why I'm a weird character person of just loving both so much.
Man, what already, as someone who is in church and seen how wild kids ministry can be.
Yeah.
I'm always grateful for those in kids ministry. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and every time I drop my kids off to go serve, I play on our worship team. I play drums. So anytime I'm dropping them off, because my kids are there all day, and we have 4 services, so it's wild on a Sunday. And I'm always grateful for the kids ministry and what they're doing. So I'll open by saying thank you for what you do, because it's so valuable. And I love our church always says that our pastors are babysitting the adults. The real world teachers are in the...
Exactly. Yep.
Doing that work is so great, and I'm sure it's not celebrated enough. So I always want to celebrate those doing that work. So I'm grateful for what you're doing in that. And then you've also got this love for barbecue. I think it's so cool. And we've only messaged back and forth. So I'm excited to hear more of your story and about you. Who's Jordan Davis?
Yeah, man, I grew up in the church. I found Jesus super early. I was one of those kids that, like, my mom always at VBS. So I think that's why kids ministry was born in me from the start. And about 13, I was that kid that they put in the nursery because I'd walk in and the babies quit crying. And still to this day, like, I'm at a good sized church, and we have 190 kids in childcare and daycare every day. And they'll call every now and then, listen, can you just come over here for a minute? And just walking in the room, a lot of times, like, there's a calmness. I don't know what it is. It's just a God-given thing, and I'm blessed by that. So yeah, I was in kids ministry very early, doing VBSs, doing the skits. About 15, I really knew that God wanted me to be a pastor. And I was like, I don't know what this looks like. I really battled that. So all through high school, I battled that. I played sports. I did other things that had my interest. At one point, I was like, man, I'm just going to go be a police officer. Because my whole thing if you ask me, the 5-year-old Jordan, what do you want to do? It's just help people. Like, I just wanted to help people. And so I ended up graduating from high school, moved.
Hey, Better Than Best Academy fam. Wanted to take a quick break from this conversation. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. But first thing I want to talk about is, did you know that 98% of the people that watch this podcast on YouTube aren't subscribed? So there's a high chance that you right now are watching this and not subscribed yet. So first, I want to say thank you so much for watching. And 2, I want to say go ahead and smash that subscribe button so that you can be the first to be notified when I drop more valuable content like this on YouTube. Now let's get back into today's episode.
Oklahoma City to go to college. And that was even just a journey of 2 weeks before school started. I was registered at a different school. And I told my dad, I'm like, hey, I'm not supposed to stay in state. I'm really staying in state because I have this girlfriend I want to stay in state for. And I think I'm supposed to be in Oklahoma. And my dad's, hey, dude, like school starts in 2 weeks. What are you thinking? And we literally left the beach and went to Oklahoma. And a week later, I moved out there. And so that's been my journey, man. I've just been crazy. But then like I went through some rough stuff. A couple of years into college, like I got married, was an associate pastor at a church. A year later, found myself alone and divorced. My wife just left. Is one of those I tell people like, I'm the reason I was the story that there was rules for. So I dated a youth pastor at our church when I was in high school. So in college, I dated a youth pastor at our church. And then she was a lot older than me. A lot of things were bad. There was definitely things on both ends that were wrong. But yeah, being 20 and divorced, I went down a pretty dark road. And I got really addicted to alcohol, really addicted to everything but Jesus, and found myself in a really broken place. And at one point, really just a long story, decided I was going to take my own life one night, and God saved my butt. I just tell people like flat out, I was driving, delivering oxygen and different medical supplies all across the state of Oklahoma. And if you've ever been to Oklahoma, like Oklahoma's pretty desolate anyway, but like I was in the panhandle of Oklahoma, like nothing going on. And I found myself just really in a bad spot. And I was like, God, if you have a plan for my life, if all this that I've been doing for 20 years is really true, then you've got to take care of this. And man, I found myself on the side of the road shaking and crying, and know that God stopped the truck that night. And the next morning I walked into the office where I was working, and they fired me. And the guy literally told me, God has a plan for your life. I don't know why you've been not listening to him for the last year and a half, 2 years. And I think the best thing I can do right now, as hard as it is let go. And that was the best moment. I had somebody that I trusted. And so we still like message each other every now and then and laugh. And not too long ago, we got to go to lunch and really hash that out. That was a long time ago now. And I look back to that moment where that was the moment that I think I switched from, man, like always trusting God because God was just in me from the start. And knowing that I had to take that moment to go from, this is not my parents' religion, this is my God, my Jesus. And so that was the moment that ministry moved on. And man, so I ended up that next couple of weeks enrolling back in school. 2 weeks later, I walked in our student center, and a girl that I had been talking to way before I ever got married the first time. So it's a funny like backstory. Like she told her roommate, like, when I come back from Christmas, I'm gonna go on a date with Jordan. And I came back engaged to my first wife. And I don't know what happened. God was telling me this all along. So 2 years later, we ended up, I bought her Panera, went to summer school class, and a lot happened in that 2 years. But we've been married 18 years. And so somebody that really helped me walk through, we met doing ministry, we met doing street ministry. And then we got married, and she did a youth ministry. And so we've been doing ministry together for almost 20 years now. Yeah.
I love that.
Crazy.
What a wild ride.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's so important, like you said, a lot of times when you've grown up in something and you've almost gotten by on mom or dad or grandma's faith, that it takes that personal relationship with Jesus and that moment of true need in him to really align you back. But what a great story. There's so many different routes we could.
Yeah, for sure. I know, I always have people talk to me, and I'm like, man, which way you want to go? Because I got a lot.
I'm curious, keeping in the kid ministry vein for a little bit before we lead into some of the business side of things. What's been one lesson that you've learned from kids ministry that's completely transformed the way that you lead adults?
Yeah, I would say that it's not much different. That the childlike faith is in us from the start. And so I think we just overcomplicated religion in general, overcomplicated God. And so I love talking about how the way I talk to a 3-year-old sometimes is the way I have to talk to a 53-year-old.
So good.
And I think sometimes we try to sound too schmoozy. That's just who we are. And I'm like, man, like the gospel hasn't changed, and we've tried to change it and make it sound better. But the truth is the truth. And so like the way I'm going to tell the story of Jonah and the whale to a 3 or 5-year-old sometimes is the way it needs to be taught to a 53-year-old, because they've never heard it either.
Yeah. Dude, that's so good. And I love that. And I've noticed that too myself, making content, because I make a lot of solo podcasts as well. And one thing that's really helped me, even like I teach drums as well to a few young guys at our church. And I've noticed quickly is like the way that I teach someone that's 3 to 5, or even my son who's 4, it's just as impactful for someone who's, like you said, 50,
Mhm.
53 or more. And it's so funny. It's like our own human nature, especially being a creative. It's almost like we want to make things so much more complicated and creative than they are. But really, it's like you said, the truth's the truth.
Yeah.
And that's so valuable. And I think that for those at home that are leaders or teachers or whatever it may be for them, is remembering that you don't have to overcomplicate the truth.
Yeah.
And what
Mm.
you're trying to tell someone, you don't have to look smart to teach someone. You just have to accurately articulate the information in a way
Yeah.
that's palatable, in a way that is understood and then applied. And I think that's such an important thing to capture. I
Yeah.
think that's great. And I'm curious, as you mentor leaders yourself, and a leader of leaders,
Yeah.
how do you help someone uncover their own blind spots?
I think a lot of it, I talk a lot about, and one of the things I have a heart to teach is, I think a lot of times leaders just automatically think that it's all about a platform that they're trying to create. That's who they are. I can tell you tons of stories in my life. Like, I came in a dark space just in ministry just not too long ago, where I had tried to build a platform of even being like the big dog in kids ministry.
Really?
And pretty quickly I found myself, like, even a few years ago, like, out of a job at a church because I had created like this platform. And I tell leaders, if you're going to create a platform, you are going to fail. But if you just walk in obedience, you are going to thrive in whatever you do, whether that's ministry, whether that's life. Like, every day I just pray, God, just let me be obedient today, whether that be conversations I have or that be with my kids, like whatever I'm supposed to tell them, whatever I'm supposed to instill in them today, like, it's got to be about obedience. And the same way, like when I walk in the office at church, man, there may be days that I have a plan. Like I told you, I'm not a planner. I keep no calendar. Like, I have an admin. Like, I'm just not a detailed person. But there's days where I'm like, man, I'm going to get this and this done. And God has other plans. And so if you walk in that obedience, like, you're going to be who God's called you to be and who he's equipped you to be as a leader. So, like, I tell the leaders, like, first step, if you're obedient to God, you're going to do amazing things.
Come on, that's so good. And that's again one of those lessons that I've had to learn too,
Mhm.
that obedience, because it's so easy. Because I'm the opposite. Like I mentioned, I have a full scripted out idea
Yep.
podcast, and it's so easy to get into planning mode. But
Yeah.
it's funny because we can make a plan and God can have a completely different plan for us. But it's being willing to step into that obedience is so important. And I
Mhm.
think the tough part too within that obedience, at least what I've found, is sometimes when we do step out in obedience, we're quickly met with opposition,
Yeah.
especially whether it's internal. Because for me, sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna step out on this obedient step that I feel like I need to take, and then the second I do, it feels like it's time for a battle. Like it's time for a struggle. But I've noticed in a lot of that stepping out on obedience, we have a chance to either look at the opposition as opposition or opportunity. And I
Yeah.
think that's a huge thing that a lot of people miss. And yeah, it's so funny. I'm curious. So as you mentioned, you yourself have battled that
Mhm.
building a platform of your own and wanting to
Yeah.
be big dog. Not just with, obviously you said first step is obedience, but can you think of any other ways that you've helped combat wanting to be the big dog?
I think embracing the moment. About 8 years ago, I found myself in just a really a bad spot in ministry. I moved my family 1,200 miles to take a church that was going to be the bigger and better church. It was going to be the next thing in our lives. Like, when we moved, and I thought everything was great. And a year in, I'm like, man, like, this is a mess. And I didn't understand. I really fought with God, like, why are we here? What are we doing? And I got a call one night, and they're like, man, I think you probably need to, like, there's some staff. There's gonna be some changes, and whatever you're offered, you need to take. And the next day I was told, like, hey, you need to probably step out. And it was really interesting because within 2 days, I had a job helping a buddy that I had really brought into church and was doing some things with. I didn't understand that. Um, and we were doing commercial cleaning. So, like, I was cleaning like grout on school floors. We cleaned prisons, like brand new things. And a year into this, his wife stood up at her baby shower, and she died. She had a splenic aneurysm. Baby died. She died. And I just tell you, like, the hardest moment in my life, one.
Yeah.
Two, all of a sudden I realized, and this was obviously months later, I realized, like, the whole reason my family moved 1,200 miles was for that moment.
Yeah.
Because for the next year, I was able to run his company. I was able to remind him every day that God loved him, even when he didn't understand. He was able to be a full-time dad for his son and all of these things. And I tell you what, if you don't embrace the moments that God gives you, you're going to miss out on huge miracles that happen. And so like there, time goes by and me running this company and the church I'm sitting in right now in my office calls. And I'm like, dude, I'm not even in ministry right now. I'm cleaning floors. I am pressure washing gum off Walmarts. And the thing that was crazy is the pastor here at this church was like, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the messy, broken people because that's who I can do ministry with.
Yeah.
And I would have never got to where I am now if I wouldn't embrace that moment. So for 2 years, like, dude, like cleaning floors was fine. Like, I think there is a lot of talk of you're never going to be the CEO until you're the janitor. Dude, I was the janitor for a couple of years and I didn't understand it. And now I understand every moment of it. Yeah.
That's
for
so
sure.
good. And I love that you mentioned that because I can think similar stories in my life. Like I can remember I mopped floors at a Tex-Mex restaurant. I live
Yeah.
in Texas for
Yes.
so long, and I was doing that full time, and then serving at the church that I'm still serving at now. But the CEO of the ministry I worked for, she was online. She was on Daystar. It was an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm very like shortening the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's say it's a very similar place of I was just faithful with what I had in my hands, and I was faithful to just show up and be obedient in that step. And it's so important for us to capitalize on that because it's those seasons of that I feel like that truly build the character in us to
Yeah.
help us sustain in these seasons. I know you probably feel the same way. You're
Well, yeah. Well, so even moments like in that time, we hired all guys that were at a sober living house. This place called Hope is
yeah,
Alive that's in Oklahoma City, and they got houses everywhere. And I was able to hire these guys. And one
yeah,
day we had this guy that literally sat on the floor cleaning her out with me. And he's, dude, I was playing on ESPN 3 weeks ago. He was quarterback and failed all these drug tests and get put in rehab and all this stuff happens. And I was sharing this story, dude, like one day you're going to be doing good things because you're taking this moment to rehab your life. And it's not just about what you have to do physically to detox. It's about what are you putting in? If you're not putting in Jesus, you're never going to be back on ESPN. Even if that's not part of the plan, like ESPN is never going to be the part of the plan again. Now this dude is like some big banker or something now. And if you're not sharing those stories, I think that's like going back to, you have to embrace the moments that God gives you. Like you don't know what God's going to do and what he's going to do in others around you.
so facts. Man, that's so good. And I love that idea of if you're not putting Jesus in it and you're not taking that time to rehab your life, because we've seen it in so many areas, especially being on the business side of things.
Yeah.
I'm sure you are now too.
Yeah.
A little bit about that before we
Yeah.
started. It's very easy to get sucked into the success of it all and being the big dog, going back to that idea of the big dog. But I'm curious, so how did you get into doing this whole barbecue thing? So that's what's curious to me because I'm listening to your story and I'm like, where does the smoking pastor come from?
Yeah, man, it was a joke almost.
That's awesome.
Everybody's creative story right now, like COVID. So I've always had a love for cooking ever since I was a kid. Loved cooking. I grew up a lot in Texas, so always loved a good barbecue. But man, like I bought a smoker. Was like this. I was asking all my friends, like, how do you cook this? How do you cook that? And all of a sudden, I just started doing it. And then I got really sick during COVID. Spent a lot of time in the hospital. Really, almost died during COVID. And I had just started posting videos right before I got sick. And spending all those days in the hospital and really almost dying, I came out. What is purposes of life? What's Jordan in 20 years? And I've always had a love to feed people. My wife, since day one, literally since before we ever dated, we had a plan. Our retirement plan is to open bed and breakfast, and it's a place for pastors to recoup, pastors to rehab. That's been a goal. And I really felt like God was just saying, I want you to start doing some of this stuff now. And so we started doing the barbecue, started posting videos, started just cooking. And then what we do today was never part of the dream initially. But about a year and a half ago, just some things started happening. And I was like, man, I want to run a free food truck. And so I started a barbecue business and I realized really quickly, not a detail person here, I don't make money because I give it all away. Like I was like, margin was like 3% is what I was making off these meals. And I'm like, man, there is nothing, I can't do this. I'm losing money. And I'm like, what if I just trash the business model and I just go all in to just nonprofit? And so we opened a nonprofit, we started doing this stuff. And then all of a sudden definitely comes back to I learned a lesson about a platform years ago. And so now I'm able to have that healthy. So we started doing some big deals, doing some high end catering. I mean, cooking for some people that were very high end. Got to cook for NBA All-Star weekend last year. And then God just has moved. Every day I wake up and I'm like, is this happening? I have sauce and seasoning that just got put in Ace Hardware locally here this week.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
Working on all these branding things, doing some deals that are huge. And my kids laugh because I have a 17-year-old who's wanting to be going culinary. And he had an interview last night at a butcher shop that just started carrying some of my stuff, using me as like one of their local influencers. And I'm like, God, like I just see you twisting and turning all this stuff together. And so my wife and I we're like, hey, let's just start this Smoking Pastor project, see what happens. We even in that story, we just had this crazy story of we had somebody let us borrow a 26-foot brand new food truck, $160,000. And Labor Day weekend, it got stolen out of our church parking lot. Hadn't had the shrink wrap taken off. And definitely one of those stories like the hugest loss, probably monetary of my life, but it's been the biggest maybe blessing of it opened some doors for some conversations. And so like, I think I hoped, oh, well, somebody's just gonna buy me something brand new, or I'm not gonna have debt because I would have had debt with this one. That can happen. Like God, maybe God will still do that, but like all of this other stuff has started from that place, and I've got hooked up with a couple organizations that I would have never got hooked up with if they didn't see my face on the news and be like, "Hey, I can't give you anything, but let's have some conversations, and I can give you a parking lot to set up in, or I can get you at this event or that event." And so our whole goal is just partner with other organizations. So we get to do a lot of catering for churches. And then God is really instilling me now, how does this open up like men's ministry? Dudes love to cook. I've got a pretty sweet looking smoker. So I pull up and there's automatically guys just flock to this cool looking smoker. And like, I'm like, God, what can you do with this? So I'm really like dreaming. Even today, I've been just dreaming. What does this look like? What does 20 years from now look like for the Smoking Pastor Project?
Man, that's so good. That's so good. Man, and to think of this, so in my head, I'm thinking also, wow, what God moments. It's so cool how like each step of your journey, especially now, like you can just see the God fingerprints on each one. Man, but with this, I can only imagine like how do you balance the demands of leadership and ministry?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a father of 3 boys, right?
Yeah.
You've got this nonprofit. How do you balance juggle all that without burning out?
Man, there's different times where different parts of me burns out. The kids pastor of me burns out. The barbecue dude burns out. The leadership development guy burns out. And I think it's having those honest voices in your life. I had a guy this week that was like, "Hey, man, you're seeming way more passionate right now on your barbecue videos than you are your church videos." And I'm like, "Oh, gut check." This week, man, I got to dive back into church a little bit more. And my team was feeling it. I'm blessed to be at a church where I have a pretty good kid staff. I have a very good kid staff. I have a pretty large kid staff. So like I can slip away a little more, but it's made me realize, am I slipping away too much? Or get in this conversation of last year, I took super good care of Jordan physically. Like I lost 88 pounds last year, but I didn't take care of me very well spiritually. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's why this year is starting out rough. There's that spiritual attack, man. I'm not armored up. And so I think just having those outside people, like I got dudes that just straight up call me and be like, "Man, I think you're slipping down a slippery slope." And if you don't have those people in your life, you are going to slip down that slope.
Man, that's so good. And I love that you touched on that. It's that, and I feel like a broken record sometimes on my podcast because there's so many pillars of our lives that are so valuable. And also being in church circles, we hear it all the time that community matters.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's having that community, having those mentors, having those people in your life that have the relationship to help you see those blind spots. Like we mentioned before, like you said, you wouldn't have seen, oh, I've been more focused here than I've been here. I've been more focused on my health and not on my spirit if you wouldn't have been around a community that's saying, or been around mentors and people that can not call you out, but to call you higher. And I think that's so important. And I'm curious with that, can you think of what would be like some of those people in your life as far as, and this is like me going off the cuff from my notes.
Yeah.
You got to give me a moment. I was like, "Oh, I want to dive into this a little bit more," but like maybe, yeah, let's go this route. So what would you say? So with those mentors, those community people in your life, what's been some of the most impactful lessons or words of wisdom that you've gleaned from those people in your life?
I'll tell you, not even just mentors, but your kids, they see you, it's night and day. I can remember years ago, the first time I really, after being out of ministry for a couple of years, the first time I really got an opportunity to go speak at a men's event, and my oldest son went with me. I spent years like way long ago traveling with like one of the big power teams. I was a lot bigger, a lot more muscular then, and I was bending bars and doing all that stuff and stopped that for a long time. And then this event, I was able to do some of that. And my son would have been like 13 then. He looked at me on the way back. We were driving 2 hours back from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'll never forget it. And he said, "Dad, you today, I missed that." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And I was like, "Me being up speaking?" He goes, "No, but you were happy." And I realized even though I maybe mentally had been happy, I hadn't been spiritually happy in a long time. And I think only your kids have and your wife probably have the bandwidth to tell you that. And they're gonna tell you that and be like, "You have what do you think?" I'm trying to read you. But I think your kids are super honest. I also think if you don't have that one person, so I specifically have one person in my life that I'm like, okay, no hold bars with you. You have permission to tell me exactly what I want to not hear. I need to know people and I want you to tell me things I don't want to hear.
Sure.
And so every now and then I'll call and be like, "Hey, I need a reality check." Or this is what I'm thinking. I called this week and I'm like, "I'm thinking these two routes with this thing. What do
Mhm.
you think?" And he's, "I don't have to tell you. What am I going to say?" And I'm like, "Yeah, forget this. This is not a no, but it's a not yet." And I'm
Yeah.
like, he's like, "Yep, thanks." Like, he didn't have to say anything, but it's just, I think you have that person that you trust that, and I think God totally gifts both of you for that conversation. Like, sometimes I can just call and be like, "All right, I don't even need to talk to you. I know what I need to hear. It's a no." Yeah.
So good. And I love that you said how important having that person is. And I feel like that's a lot of what I've been graced to be for the
Mhm.
people, whether it's the people I mentor. Just I can think of some young guys that go to the college at our church that I
Mm.
mentor, or whether it's people that are my coaching clients. And again, it's tough. And like you mentioned, it's tough to speak about yourself in the form of
Yeah.
the brand and
Yeah.
building that thing. But I really believe that's a unique gift that I don't take for granted with the people that I've been blessed to serve and lead. And I think that's such a crucial step to knowing not only are you receiving that, but
Mhm.
you're that for someone else. And I think that's leadership in a whole. Because oh man, I love the way that someone put it. I can't. I don't want to butcher the story, but essentially, when it comes to leadership, is not that title.
Mm.
It's the messy work that no one wants to do. It's having
Mhm.
those difficult conversations with someone you lead and being willing to do it and package it in a way that comes out of wanting the best for that person.
Mhm.
And that's such a challenge sometimes I feel, and especially with our kids. I think it's a give and take because I can think of those moments as well for me, man. I always love
Well,
to say, "Oh, go ahead."
I was like on the brand stuff too. Like this week, I've had to have that conversation a lot. As we were talking about earlier. Like I've been trying to just brand the Smoking Pastor Project as a logo, and my marketing guy, like he very young in his faith, very young. So I put him on my board, really not even knowing where he stood because I just felt like I was supposed to. So, and like he's built this huge relationship with God. Like we've been able to work together, mentor him. And he's like, "Dude, you have to promote yourself." And I'm like, "No." So we have fought this battle for a year. And finally this week, I'm like, "All right." I cooked this high end event. Actually, one of the directors of like marketing for Campbell's Soup was there. I was telling Scott Barlow this just a minute ago, and you are never, it's going to take you 10 years or more to create a brand that doesn't revolve around you. But until that happens, you have to embrace that you are the brand and count it an honor that you're that brand. And I don't know if this dude's a Christian. He said honor. And all of a sudden this week, I've just been like, "God, like it's an honor to be able to lead this brand. And if I have to be the face of this brand for now, that's okay because you have put me in this moment. One day, maybe it's going to be handed down to my kid or one of my kids or all my kids or none of my kids. But what if I just embrace this now? What can you do with it?" And I'm like, "Okay, so I'm okay with this. I'm okay that my face is on a bottle of barbecue sauce because you know what? Like all the money made from Ace Hardware, the barbecue sauce goes to Smoking Pastor Project. So this face has to sell barbecue. I think it would be opposite. It would turn people away. But if it sells it and more people are fed, man, I'm okay with that." And so, man, it's an honor. Okay, God, you put me in this position.
And I also think that there's a lot to unpack about your character and your integrity being that way. Because if you weren't already in a space of humility, then you would be completely fine with it.
Yeah, I never cleaned that grout on those floors. I would be, man, look what I've done. Let's quit church and grow this brand. And
Exactly.
now I'm like, man, what if one day I could work at the church for free because this nonprofit has grown so much that I can take a salary from the nonprofit and I can work at the church for free. We can have a bigger kid staff and we're going to see more people come to Christ because they're not paying me. They're paying 30 people to do what I'm doing.
Literally. And that's where we play from.
Yeah.
That we play from. That's so
Yeah.
I can think of, I don't personally know him, but like One Degree of Separation. And
Mm.
he runs a great video. It's called the Video Department. And he runs a great coaching program helping businesses with their branding. And he is a associate pastor at his church, but he doesn't take any salary. He still preaches there a couple of times a year. He's involved. He goes, he attends, and he's just got such a profitable business that he's
Yeah.
actually sowing into not only his time, but the business that he's
Yeah.
made. And I think that's such a beautiful goal to set. I think of it the same way. Because me with ministry is when I was growing up, once I got about 2011, when I really was following God and I found him for myself, I was like, I'm going to be in full-time ministry. And then, of course, I got blessed with an opportunity to be in full-time ministry. It wasn't the church I'm currently at, but it was like another project. She was more so like a online
Yeah.
ministry kind of thing. She was on videos and stuff. I mentioned it a little earlier. And I say all that to say is I thought that was it for me. But then secretly, I thought my end game was I'm just going to go work for my church. But then now that I've started doing what I'm doing with my business now and the platform now here, and I see people like my friend I mentioned, how beautiful it will be to be able to fund my church's vision and my church's, not my church, but the church.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
be able to be a part of it from that angle and still continue to sow in my time in a way that I'm not trying to look for an exchange of monetary exchange. But yeah, that's such a beautiful thought to think of. And man, who's to say God won't do it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I love that. Again, it's like you said, it's it's that courageous conversation of putting yourself out there in that space is really, yeah, I'm excited to see what your nonprofit, the Smoking Pastor, takes off. I think it's going to be super, super interesting to see in a few years. But with that, thinking in that vein of things, what would you say has been some of your biggest challenges now, whether it's in ministry or in the nonprofit or in the business space that you can think of?
Man, I would say staying focused on all is always going to be hard.
Oh,
Also, not letting, I think there is a thing every now and then that pride does slip in. I do have a challenge a lot of times. Like I do so much of how the Smoking Pastor stuff started. It was started from in our church. So every now and then there is some times where business leaders will come to me and they're like, man, because you've associated yourself with the church, I can't do this for you, or I can't do that for you. Or even on the healthy side of sometimes our church people, like when my trailer was stolen, I think a lot of people thought like the church was gonna come bail me out, or because it was parked at the church, like it was the church's problem. Like I got nothing. Like I didn't get any. The church's insurance didn't take care of it, and I've had to walk that line like very humble and say, God, you have a plan. I'm not gonna say anything, and that is hard. There's sometimes where I just want to be like, listen, this is my thing, not the church's thing. Every now and then the two get confused, but I just look at it like right now, it's okay if it's messy. But it's been hard to not clear the lines a few times. Be like, the church doesn't give me any money. The church, this has nothing to do with them. But at the same time, it's, man, if people will come to the church because of something I'm doing, the Smoking Pastor project right now, isn't that the plan anyway? Isn't that the bigger picture? So why are you being jealous or being mad in your head? So I think keeping that clear laser focus. And I would say too, I'm realizing kids pastor in me, man, the time I have with my kids is so limited. I took my son 2 weeks ago on his first college visit.
yeah.
And then my other son, my middle son and my youngest son turned 9 yesterday. And I'm realizing, man, that window is closing. And then next year will be the first year in almost 20 years that I haven't had a kid in kids ministry, in my own kids ministry. And so now I'm handing off all of my kids' spiritual development, not at home, to our youth pastor, middle school pastors. And I'm like, man, this is the first time, like, this may be the best thing for my kids because dad is not their pastor. And so I'm excited about that, but it's hard to give that up too.
Bet. Man, yeah, I'm sure that's a unique challenge. As I mentioned, like being a dad of a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and
Yeah.
it's wild to see this stage. And I know what I've learned from this stage, and I'd be curious, what's a bit of maybe advice or encouragement you would give to a dad that's got maybe younger kids?
Mhm. Yeah, embrace those small moments for sure. Be present in those small moments, man, and have a ritual when you drive home. That's one thing I've tried to do in the last 10 years. Is that there's either a drive I take before I get home to unwind, especially if it's been a bad day. It's been that day where your trailer's still on. It's been that day where maybe you're at a church and your board didn't want to do the one event you did. Whatever that is, there's certain things you do, but then also I think the best thing for me spiritually as a dad over the last 5 years for sure is I've taken the first hour of every day at a specific spot to do that I am who I want to be where I'm at. And what I mean by that is I sit at the exact same spot. We have a tea shop in town. I sit on a bar stool every morning from 7 to 7:50 exact. People know where I'm at, but they also know that's not the time that they can bother me. And even though it's not my spiritual development time, it's not my Bible reading time, it's the time that I'm a super creative person. I'm also a super big people person. And so I get to do what I love for that 55 minutes every single day. And I know that I'm a better person at the end of the day because I started my morning the way I love to start my morning. So like whatever habit that is for you, do that every day because your kids are going to know if you did it or not. Your wife's going to know if you did it or not because you're going to come home probably not as good of a person if you didn't.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, having that ritual, having that routine, having that thing that's really going to align you and,
Yeah.
and making it non-negotiable.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of what you said, there's a couple of things that I do myself. And man, that yours sounds nice.
Yeah.
I'm more so at home more often because I'm actually at home with our kids most of the week because my wife's a hairstylist and I do a lot of online work. Yeah, if I don't get that morning of a cold plunge or some kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
and then some time in the word and
Yeah.
then a workout, those
Yeah.
non-negotiables. If I don't, then I'm a different person. And it's and being willing to let that not be and being a non-negotiable, whether it's say it's we had a snow day here in Texas, wild
Yeah.
one, one of those wild snow days, and still doing that
Yeah.
and showing up for that. I get it. Sometimes you're going to miss a few days, but being committed to those things really does set up so much more than you think. And I think that was that's a
I heard a story years and years ago, and that's what got me in the ritual thing of I don't know if it's a true story. It's one of those pastor stories that it's a pastor's parable, is what I say. But this old man would come in every day and he would pull this leaf off his tree at his house, and he just knew that was like laying down the day and walking in his house fresh. And his neighbor 20 years later is, dude, you're killing that tree. And he said, I'd rather have a bare tree than a bare house. And I'm like, ooh, that's good. It's okay to have a bare tree, better than having a bare house. And so whatever that is for you, when you walk in your house, like for me, a lot of times it's just a deep breath before I open that door, or go in the house and be like, guys, today, give me 10 minutes. Like 10 minutes will help everything today. And being honest with your family, it's okay. Like dad's not okay today. I'm not in a good spot. Like I physically, like I have lupus. So there's days that I hurt so bad that I can't move. And my kids just know, okay, dad, like we'll take out the trash. They should do that every day, but they don't. Or I'm going to cut the grass. Or we have 14 inches of snow on the ground right now. My kids are supposed to be shoveling the driveway right now because my snowblower won't start. Being honest and be like, dad, I can't do it today. I want to do it, like mentally, especially like with physical, like I want to do it, but I can't. And that's okay. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, that's so good. And I feel like that part's not talked about enough, especially in Christian circles. It's okay to not be okay. I think that the more honest we're about that, especially us as leaders, and I think to a lot of my audience is Christian men that are leaders. And I feel like there's a little bit of pride and ego there. As a man, you want to always just shovel it down. I think I saw a great meme and it was a guy, it was like two pictures of the same guy. And on the outside, he said, I'm fine. And then on the inside, it was like depressed, overwhelmed, even suicidal. A lot of times we're almost too prideful to admit that we're going through something. But I think that there's such a freedom on the other side of releasing that. Obviously, you're not going to go tell a stranger down the street that you don't know this. But having, again, it goes back to that idea of having the right people surrounding you. And a lot of times that can be a spouse or maybe kids that are older, friends, whatever it may be. But having that ability to just be honest about when you're not okay. Having the boundaries set up in place to help everyone involved. Because if you don't say you're not okay, then what happens? You just bottle it up and then you just try to continue to do what you're doing. And then when you do blow up on your kids or your wife, you're like, wait, what just happened.
Mhm.
They don't know what's happening because you didn't tell them. And yeah, I think that's so important. And even you mentioned, it's funny, you mentioned something like taking a deep breath before you
Yeah.
walk in. And it's really cool. I've been studying modern applied psychology,
Mhm.
and it's this idea of anchoring. And it's
Mhm.
basically you make a physical, either a movement or a gesture. Like some people, to feel more confident, they'll pat their chest.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, for instance, for you, it's you take a deep breath. And for me, I've adopted this idea of wearing different hats. And say
Mhm.
I've been wearing the hat of my business all day or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. And the moment before I get in the door, I take off that hat. So I'm taking off all of the stress, all of the weight of that. And then I'm putting on the hat that's dad, or I'm putting on the
Yeah.
hat spouse. And being able to differentiate those things has been super crucial in my own life. And I've seen in a lot of other lives as well. But man, I've been loving this conversation.
But right, taking time to have no hats on, man, that is so important too. If we're not doing that,
And that's probably the biggest one that I think a lot of us, including myself, have gotten better with. And even you mentioned the COVID and the great panini.
yeah.
I think that there was a beauty in that because
Mhm.
it gave us that opportunity to see that we aren't just what we do,
Mhm.
but who are we behind that?
Yeah.
And it was revealing for a lot of us. I know there was a lot of negative character traits that a lot of people got exposed in. And I think that, yeah, if you don't make time, and again, it goes back to how you're hardwired. And I feel like a lot of my audience, a lot of my guests, we're very driven people. We're very high performing. And I can imagine you are. You run a ministry, you run a nonprofit, you're a dad, you've got a lot of going for you.
Yeah.
And there's few things that help with that than scheduling rest,
It is.
scheduling time to just be. And I love that's part of your routine is you go and you sit on a bar stool is it a coffee shop?
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
And you get to sit. And it's funny because so many people are like, what are you doing? Don't just sit there, do something.
Yeah.
But what if we did just sit there
Yeah.
and allow God to work on our hearts, work on our minds? It's such a valuable, simple, yet can be difficult thing to do for us that are so busy and so drawn to do the next thing.
Open to relationships. Like that's the place where, man, between barbecue, church, and just personally, I've met people that I would never meet, some celebrities. Like it's a little bougie place. And I have been one gifted financially through the nonprofit so much, but two, been given opportunities that only God, straight up, only God can do by me sitting there. And I've become like this local pastor at this place now where these people come in and out and they're like, you're telling me about their problems and I'm just listening. I'm not trying to solve it. I'm not even trying to be the preacher in me. I'm just trying to listen to you. I'll just listen. Like go to Jordan over in the corner. He's here every morning. Give him your crap. It's fine. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's so cool. And that's so unique that you've created that space and you give yourself the ability to not try to fix it, to
No.
just listen. And that's so important for so many people. I think that's great. And transition a little bit as I'm looking through some of my notes and checking on our time frame. It's funny, I try to keep these about an hour tops, but I'm always open to see where the Spirit takes us. But one thing I like to try to, at least at some point, discuss on most of my episodes is that idea of legacy. And I want to ask it this way for you, looking at maybe from the nonprofit side of things and your smoking pastor project, if that grew beyond your wildest dreams, like what legacy would you want it to leave behind?
I mean, our whole thing is crafting smiles one by a time. So every piece of clothes we have say, and I think it's the idea that probably the most vulnerable spot anybody is in a daily life is when they're eating. Because usually their mouth's full, they're not talking, and it's really good to shut up and just listen. But two, the idea of how much community happens around the table is invaluable. Like that. So I can sit and we can sit up in a parking lot, offer free food. We're to the point where we're going to start advertising that. Like, hey, we're set up in Indianapolis. We're on 21st and Meridian or whatever, and say, just come get a free meal. I don't care if you're a millionaire or you're homeless. Like that whole idea of there's no hook in this. All we're doing is just giving you a meal. Like there's no expectations. And just seeing what kind of conversation happens. So I just would love, that's it. There is no big picture. It's just literally free food, free conversations. If the opportunity for prayer comes up, if the opportunity for an invite comes up, like just opening up to whatever God has for every conversation. That's the plan. There isn't anything else. It's so simple, but I think it's so strong too.
And that's so good. And I love that you touched on how much happens around the dinner table or the
Yeah.
lunch table or breaking bread. And I feel like if we're not careful, we'll take ourselves way too serious.
Mhm.
And we think that we need to, especially in the Christian circles, it's like we think we need to be in another service or we need to be in another devotional. Yes, those things are important and valuable. And so is that aspect of fun. And it's funny because I didn't always feel that way. So when I hear people literally made a whole nonprofit helping feed people and creating an atmosphere for fun and
Yeah.
enjoyment is such a valuable thing because we can get into these spaces of thinking, oh, it's so focused and so serious. But I like to ask people, and they even did I think I saw somewhere where there was an interview with The Rock, Dwayne
Mhm.
Johnson, The Rock, and I think it was this young kid was interviewing them. So it's such a cute moment. But they asked him, when's the last time you had fun?
Mm.
He couldn't think of the last time he had fun. Just that question sparked him going back to his family and asking when's the last time that he had fun. And I feel a lot of us that are very involved in things, whether it's business or ministry, we can get really into the doing and the working that we forget to have fun. And I really believe that God didn't just create us for this life to be so driven and focused that we forget that fun factor. And I think that's beautiful what you're doing with your nonprofit with the smoking project.
That's why a lot of people ask us, like, why aren't you only feeding homeless? Like, we do a lot of last 3 events, I fed firefighters, like random fire stations. Every other Friday, we do a free food Friday. Whether we're feeding police officers, firefighters, hopping in like nursing homes or hospitals. We're not just feeding like people that have to have that meal to survive. We're
Yeah.
saying, let's give back to the people that do things for people. So disaster relief, all these things. People are like, man, you just need to be laser focused on one thing. I'm like, no, I just want to put smiles on people's faces. Like meals put smiles on people's faces, and that's opportunities for God to shine.
So good. With that, and you touched a little bit on it, but I'd be curious your thoughts. What's been maybe the most significant lesson that you've learned from crafting smiles through food and
Yeah.
service?
I think definitely the having our trailer stolen, like what my dream was not God's dream. Like I thought I was going to be like having this amazing kitchen that was mobile. And now I'm like, man, I don't need that. That's the vision that I had, Jordan had, was I going to have this amazing food truck that was going to travel the country. Man, I'd be heading to California today. That was the ultimate dream.
Huh.
Now I'm like, that's awesome. But how can this vision get big enough where there's somebody already there's a smoking pasture in California that can take care of that, literally. That's the big vision. But also, like with that trailer stolen, that there's so many things that I thought I needed that I don't have to have. I wanted the bright, shiny truck to pull the trailer. I wanted everything because I wanted to give God my best, right? So, like, I wanted the $100,000 trailer. Now I'm sitting in my driveway right now is a box truck that God just blessed us with. It's a 1990 standard, 290,000 miles. And I'm so proud of this truck.
I love it.
Not anything I thought it'd be, and it's got a busted up door right now that I need somebody to fund to pay for to fix it, to replace it, but I know God's gonna replace that door, and what that allows me to do compared to a massive kitchen, now what I realized with the mobile kitchens, I had no room to store tables and chairs, get people around a table. I had nowhere to store massive amounts to feed 400 or 500 people, not just doing a food truck where you're feeding a line, like, I need to be able to mass serve.
Yeah.
It's what I started with, I thought was the plan, and all of that has been washed away. And now I have this God-given vision of like, I can go feed multitudes of people with this box truck. And we can cook 56 pork butts and feed a lot of people some pork or some healthy chicken and roasted veggies and all this stuff. Cause all we need is some warming cabinets and a box truck. That's it. And so simplify everything.
That's so good, man. I love that. Man, before we wrap up today, it's already been our time frame. I want to give people the opportunity, Jordan, to reach out and connect with you.
Yeah. That's,
So maybe share a little bit, and then we'll have it in the description.
yeah.
But share a little bit on how people listening or watching can find you, connect with you, and even like you mentioned, like being a nonprofit, there's a busted door that needs to be fixed,
Yeah.
and I feel like the more awareness people have of how they can help, because they see something great like this,
There's,
it's amazing. Like you're feeding those in need, you're feeding those that work hard. You're
Yeah.
providing that fun, that great meal, and you're getting an opportunity to spread the gospel, whether
Right.
it's directly or indirectly, being the hands and feet feeding. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'd love to hear how they can find you, if see your work, whether it's
Yeah, yeah,
whatever it may
yeah.
be.
SmokingPastorProject.com is our website. That's an easy way to donate, but that's an easy way to find everything we do. And then all social media is just at Smoking Pastor. And we're trying to jump into this creator stuff and TikTok and Instagram. And what I've realized is that's a way that we can start paying for stuff. So watching videos, sharing videos, like we're trying to grow this audience. And for us, that's how it's one thing for a normal creator to get brand deals. What helps us is like guys like Scott Barlow, guys that have helped us give us product. What for me, it's not even the money, it's building relationships with these smoking companies, these barbecue companies. Like product is gold for me. I cook 2,500 pounds of meat a month. Half of that's for sale that brings money into the project. It goes, we don't like my family takes nothing from the nonprofit at all right now. Like we haven't figured that out yet, but we're cool with it. So we do catering that brings money in, but then we're trying to figure out like the other half that we give away, like how do we fund that? So we're hoping like through video and through our barbecue sauce and seasoning and all that stuff. That's how we're able to bring money in to pay for what we're doing. But yeah, follow the videos and we just have fun. Like we cook some random stuff. Like I told you, my son, my oldest is in culinary and we're learning like, what can we cook tonight? So like on Saturdays, a lot of times we're cooking 7 or 8 meals to have video content for the week. And we're always creating something crazy.
Dude, I love that. And even as you're speaking, this is just me, wild ideas, thinking of things that I've been a part of in the past with various nonprofits. Have you ever thought of possibly like a gala? That would be cool.
No, that'd be
Like
cool.
kind of like an event that
Yeah.
was for the Smoking Pastors Project, where you're raising funds, maybe not only for the nonprofit itself, but maybe you combine with other events,
Yeah.
maybe support something in need.
Yeah.
Something to a few of those locally. My wife being a part of a great salon, there's a lot of those with with helping hands,
Yeah.
these salons, and there's a lot of people that have generated wealth and created successful businesses, and they've realized that it's so much more than them acquiring more
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
why not give back to the community, give
Yeah.
back to people like you, these nonprofits that are doing great things. Yeah, just
Yeah, good. Well, those are the kind of things you write down. Somebody told me the other day, like, why don't you start doing barbecue classes? I just want to learn barbecue and it's making fun. And I'm like, oh, wow. You take and that's stuff you have to hear from people. Like you take that stuff for granted. Like even you buy a Traeger and throw a brisket in there. And I'm like, but how do you, my wife will be like, but yeah, but you cut it a certain way. You season it a certain way. You do this and this. And I'm like, oh yeah. Like I forget.
literally. And and even as you say classes, I think of building almost like a course.
Yeah.
This course, how to make the best brisket. Because me being in Texas, being
Oh yeah.
briskets.
Oh yeah.
I've got a guy, the host home for our men's group in my church. He does barbecue on the side. And meeting with you guys, I'm like, man, I really need to get y'all connected. But
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd love to hear what's been working for you
Yeah.
guys, because he
Yeah.
does a full-time job and he does it on the side just for
Mhm.
fun. But yeah, and I see things like even when I told him once, I was like, you just got to make something where you teach people how you do what you do.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I think it goes back to overcomplicating it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are some great ideas. I think we
Yeah.
definitely will
Yeah.
being recorded. So
Really.
always to think of. But man, it's been such a great conversation with you, Jordan.
Thank you.
And again, I love to end my shows by encouraging my guests, because I don't just have anybody on my show. Like I really feel like, one, I'm preferably considering who's on my show,
Yeah.
and two, I feel like there's a bit of discernment there. But I can just tell you're a man of integrity and character, and a man after God's own heart, and you're using your talents and skills to not only just build the kingdom, but build communities and encourage people and bring them closer to God, and just realize what it is to follow God, and this love that a lot of people don't see these days, and this encouragement that a lot of people don't see these days. And I just want to give you your flowers while I
Yeah.
can,
Thanks.
and encourage you in what you're doing. Keep being the smoking pastor, because we need more people doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And with that said, do you have any last words for anyone before we sign off?
I would just say whatever dream like God gives you, go for it. I wish I would have. I had this dream a while back. I wish I would have went for it then, because I could be so much farther. And so God gives you those moments, and those moments, take them and run, because you don't know what's going to impact and who it's going to impact, especially. So go for it.
Come on. That's so good. You heard it from Jordan himself. Go out and live those dreams. What's stopping you? And that's it for today's episode of the Better Than Best Academy podcast. Again, huge thank you to Jordan Davis, the Smoking Pastor. Go check him out with his Smoking Pastor project, all the stuff that he's getting into. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, your stories. And remember, those watching, those listening, I'm praying for you, friend. Love you. Now let's go live better than best as we conquer this week.